Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, we do have a winter storm warning out here for the southern part of the southeast coast. Well, actually specifically for Hyder over toward the border there. That's for heavy snow, and that's out until 9 p.m. this evening, and storm totals will range anywhere from 12 to 18 inches in and around the Hyder area, and then it'll let up here later this evening. Otherwise, winter weather advisory out for the Kenai Peninsula also until 9 p.m., or actually until 6 p.m. this evening. It's just a couple more hours now, and anywhere from 5 to 10 inches of snow has fallen there across the Kenai Peninsula. And then also winter weather advisories are out for the central interior from Tanana across the Tanana Valley into the 40-mile country, down to the Alaska Range, into the Yukon Flats. And that's out for tonight and tomorrow. Actually be ending tonight here in the western areas and then hanging on until tomorrow afternoon here in the eastern areas as that moisture slowly moves out of the area off to the east. And look for anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of snow, and some areas will see reduced visibilities. Moving on to satellite imagery, you see low pressure here right over just about the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound area, and that's produced kind of a widespread area of light snow here across the Kenai Peninsula, and Prince William Sound, the Copper River Basin, Gulkana picked up about a couple inches of snow today. Some areas had more, other areas had less, and then maybe up to an inch or two or more actually snow the entire day, say for around the Fairbanks area. And that actually extends all the way up, tries to get over the Arctic coast, but there's just a narrow band up there on the, say from Wainwright on up to Point Barrow of light snow. Clearing out here, narrow area high pressure coming into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta and Bristol Bay, Kodiak, and that building high, even though it's narrow, it's enough gradient with it that Kodiak State Airport reported a gust of 65 miles an hour out of the northwest earlier this morning, and that's gradually coming down now this afternoon. And breezy along the southwest coast, but not too bad. A lot of cold air and unstable conditions by the open cell queue here brought kind of snow squalls into the Pribilof Islands today. One kicking the winds up to 40 miles an hour at St. George this afternoon, and a very weak system here spreading some rain and snow up into the Adak-Atka area. And you can see that tracking eastward here, it's not much of a wind producer yet, not much of a precipitation producer as well. One reason it's moving at a pretty good clip there. And there it is on the chart, just south of the Aleutians. The warm front, weak warm front in this area, and then a cold front in the back there with the main precipitation zone right over with the surface low. Got low pressure in the Bering Sea producing snow showers there and the gusty west winds, and then narrow area of high pressure here along the Bristol Bay area just west of Kodiak on up into the northwest interior, so areas to the east seeing these showers and snowfall. Again, several inches over the Copper River Basin, and then areas up along that trough back out toward the central Arctic coast. This is really a narrow band of snow showers here from Nunivak Island, or actually St. Lawrence Island, really thinning out as it comes across the Alaska Peninsula. And rain, about a ½ inch worth, fell at Ketchikan, Angoon, and Wrangell today. That's about the heaviest rainfall amounts, about a ½ inch in the 12-hour period, and at 3 p.m. this afternoon. And then, of course, a lot of that falling as snow over toward the Hyder area. And for tonight, that front will push off and another trough will come in. So you've got the west-southwest flow. It's a wet weather pattern there for sure for the southeast coast, and that's going to continue tonight with probably the rainfall rates a little less than what they were today. But snowfall levels are gradually coming down, colder air coming in aloft, and so many areas will mix in with snow down to sea level, especially over the southern areas later tonight, and mainly just snow showers on the North Gulf Coast. Areas of snow here into the Copper River Basin once again and into the eastern interior, and then some flurries or snow showers along that weak trough with mostly clear skies to the southwest of it and also to the northeast. Snow showers continue over the Bering Sea with this weakening system and winds letting up considerably. You can see pretty breezy still across the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, southern Cook Inlet, but diminishing for Kodiak, staying dry there, risk of a snow shower maybe on the southwest coast. And there's that system bringing some rain and snow into the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, which really weakens and tracks into Bristol Bay on Tuesday there with an area of snow with it. Stays pretty nice, mostly sunny, Kodiak Island, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, into the northern Bering Sea. Next system spreading another round of warmer temperatures with the warm front and rain into the western Aleutians. Stays clear and cold here. Some areas struggling to get above zero for Tuesday over the northern interior. And mostly cloudy with some snow showers, especially along the North Gulf Coast into the northern Panhandle. And outlook for Wednesday, about the same thing here. Snow showers in the northern Panhandle, rain or snow down to the south, dry over much of Alaska and cooler, and precipitation makes landfall in the afternoon here along the southwest coast, starting out as snow, changing to a mix, and then just rain and wind for the eastern Aleutians and Pribilofs. Lows tonight, 0 to 15 below over the northern interior, single numbers south out toward the coast, and then 20s for the Bering Sea. Highs tomorrow, single numbers, some areas not getting above zero, staying a little below. And then the lows the following morning, colder, 10 to 20, 25 below zero, and near 10.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic here for Tuesday morning. Mostly marginal VFR out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, with a couple areas of VFR and a couple areas of IFR there right across the Fox Islands and then just west of Shemya. And then the interior, kind of a variety here, areas of VFR, areas of marginal VFR, and areas of IFR, especially along the Alaska Range here, and then over toward the, on down to the eastern North Gulf Coast into the Panhandle, and another patch up on the North Slope and Seward Peninsula. And for the afternoon, a little more widespread VFR showing up here right along the Yukon River Valley there and on up to the Noatak Valley in the northwest coast. Marginal and IFR for the area from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, and still along the Alaska Range, IFR or marginal conditions. And northern third of the Panhandle, IFR, southern part, marginal. And the Gulf of Alaska now just marginal VFR. You can see VFR breaking out Kodiak Island all the way up into the Susitna Valley and possibly the Matanuska Valley, although you may say marginal into the afternoon. Marginal VFR along the southwest coast. Another big batch of IFR pushing into the western Aleutians and actually to the central Aleutians from the west. And that continues to slowly move eastward for Wednesday morning. We've got one band of moisture here bringing IFR conditions in toward Nikulski, in toward the Pribilofs, and then back down across the western Aleutians. VFR in Nunivak Island into Bristol Bay. Most of the east side of the state, all the way to the Arctic coast, is VFR, except over toward the Wrangell Mountains. Marginal VFR, Kuskokwim Valley, back west-northwest into Norton Sound, and part of the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island. And the southeast coast, eastern areas there in the IFR zone. And then for Wednesday afternoon, that pretty much holds in place there. Stationary status quo over toward the border of IFR flying conditions, but VFR, Prince of Wales Island, maybe a net Metlakatla, marginal up to the north. Marginal VFR now over the Copper River Basin to the eastern North Gulf Coast, VFR, Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and much of the interior. Marginal VFR in areas of the North Slope, patch IFR there for the Wainwright area in Atchison. Otherwise, a big batch of IFR again here over the Bering Sea, continuing to move eastward and banking up along the Bering Sea side of the Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula, back down across Adak and Atkin, and VFR to the west of there. And for passes tomorrow, marginal VFR becoming VFR for both Anatuvik and Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR, rainy, IFR gradually improving to marginal VFR in the afternoon. Windy, marginal VFR at times. And for Isabel, IFR. And Mentesta, IFR becoming marginal in the afternoon. And Tanita, same trend, IFR slowly becoming marginal, and that probably hanging on into the evening. Portage, though, VFR, and Chilcoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels 2,000 feet now, down south of the state completely, down in Queen Charlotte's and south of the Aleutians. So we've just got the surface to look at here, across just south of St. Matthew Island, in up to Cape Newenham, and then up along, hugging the coastline. Icing. With that next system, a big batch of moisture coming in, big push of with a southwest jet here, bringing considerable moderate across the western Aleutians tonight, tonight, and then tomorrow that'll be up in the western Bering. Otherwise, pretty much icing free everywhere else except for the southeast coast here. Some areas of very light and minimal, considerable moderate rime or even mixed icing. And for the jet stream here, there's the upper level low associated with that, slowly moving eastward, keeping it unsettled there for the Panhandle. And this one down to the south, and then some ridging out here over the Bering Sea. And 9,000-foot winds, 45 knots, Kodiak Island, southern Kenai Peninsula through Kamishak Gap there, then diminishing back to the northwest, coming around this low, 30 to 40 knots, heading in toward the Panhandle. And out to the west, 50 to 60 knot winds there, with the strongest there ahead of that next storm. 3,000 feet, about say 45 knots, and then lighter to the east, northwest winds here of about 25 to 30 knots up across St. Matthew Island, but really diminishing up here in the north. The interior, not too bad. Several lows spread the gradient out, so the winds are pretty much light. Northwest band here, 20 to 25 down across Kodiak. Southwest 25 in the central coast. Turbulence. Occasional moderate chop, southeast coast, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, and the Aleutians.
Here at the end of the Earth, it still feels like a place for raw exploration and adventure. It's vast in all directions and ground zero for some of the biggest questions we have about the climate. But when we decided to make a series about the frozen places on Earth, we knew there would be one hurdle we would need to jump over first. What is the cryosphere?
The what?
Ooh.
I have no idea.
While I'm aware of the cryosphere, I don't actually know what it is.
It has something to do with ice. All right, that's all I got.
How do you get people acquainted with the cryosphere when most of us don't even know what it is?
Hey, so here we are in Washington, D.C., standing on the roof of NASA headquarters. That's the Capitol building right behind me. And what headquarters does is kind of serve as the focal point to connect the dots.
That's Dr. Tom Wagner, NASA's cryospheric program scientist at headquarters. In short, Tom is responsible for making sure NASA knows what the current status of the cryosphere is.
The cryosphere is everything from the snow that falls by your house to the icy reaches of the Himalayas, to the big ice sheets of Antarctica all the way at the South Pole, and also the frozen ground of the Arctic, and even some of that frozen ground that's currently under the ocean.
If you had to break it down, you'd have a mix of sea ice, snow cover, permafrost, ice sheets, and glaciers.
Right now, our best predictions are that sea levels will rise anywhere from 1 to 3 feet within the next 100 years. 3 feet of sea level rise has the potential to displace about 100 million people, which is a lot of people that need to find new homes.
Our current reality places us at a near tipping point, and the cryosphere is playing a huge part in that delicate balance.
So one of the things people don't know about NASA is that we study the Earth, and we've been doing that since NASA's inception back in the 1950s. And we study the frozen part of the Earth in a variety of ways.
Missions like SNOWX, Airborne Snow Observatory, Oceans Melting Greenland, Operation Icebridge, Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, and countless other labs and individual researchers stand at the forefront of monitoring the cryosphere. But this year was a particularly big year.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Grace Follow-On, continuing the legacy of the Grace mission of tracking the movement of water across our planet.
2 state-of-the-art satellite missions are being launched in a single year as part of a major attempt to understand Earth's frozen places. Our scientists are answering hard questions, sharing stories from the field, and giving their best predictions for what we can expect of a warming world. We're taking you with us as we follow NASA explorers on their journey to the frozen ends of the Earth as they study our rapidly changing world from satellites, planes, and boots on the ground.
What we can do really well from orbit is we can tell when a surface of land is covered in snow. What's tricky is though, how thick is that snow? And it's even trickier how much water is in that snow.
What we think of snow depends a lot on where it falls. If you live in the eastern US, maybe it's fun. Or maybe it's just a pain.
But if you live in parts of the world where they depend on the water that's in the snow for a large fraction of their total water that they use for drinking, for agriculture, for industry, or for hydropower, the snow is a very important natural resource. For example, in the western part of the United States, 80 to 90% of their renewable water comes from snow.
Snow is one part of the cryosphere that many of us have actually encountered before, but it also plays a critical role in regulating the Earth's climate. Through decades of remote sensing, NASA has kept a close eye on the ebb and flow of snow cover.
We now have a 52-year record of snow cover in the Northern Hemisphere, and we can see changes in the extent of snow cover over the time period, particularly in the last few decades, where we can see that the snow cover has been retreating. It's been melting a lot earlier in the springtime.
The extent is relatively easy to do, and it has been done over the years. What's tricky is though, how thick is that snow? And it's even trickier how much water is in that snow.
That tricky part is known as the snow-water equivalent, or how much water would actually be in a layer of snow if it melted. NASA and its partners have taken to the air to help solve this elusive mystery. First, there's the Airborne Snow Observatory, or ASO, a small plane outfitted with a couple of instruments, one of which measures snow depth using LiDAR. LiDAR measures distance using light from lasers. Since 2014, ASO has flown over basins in California and Colorado, taking before and after looks at snow depth. Scientists subtract the snow-free summer data from the snow-on winter data to get an idea of the snow depth. There's no single way to measure all types of snow across the globe, and so NASA's other airborne campaign, SnowX, is testing different combinations of sensors. This winter, SnowX will test a new instrument, the Snow-Water Equivalent Synthetic Aperture Radar and Radiometer, or SWISAR.
SWISAR consists of 2 main components, one of them being the radar and the second one being the radiometer.
So with the radar providing the depth of the snow and the radiometer providing the density of the snow, we could put those 2 things together and get the snow-water equivalent. Here in the chamber, we're going to measure different radiation patterns at our different frequencies and do some full system testing in this chamber. This chamber kind of enables us to isolate various types of radiation and interference. And in about a month, we're going to take the instrument, mount it on a Twin Otter in the Grand Mesa in Colorado, and we're going to fly it over the Grand Mesa and take various different measurements. This is what we call our engineering flight.
Making sure the sensors are calibrated is key in order to face the challenges nature will throw at them.
Half of the area that gets covered by snow every winter contains trees and forest. and the trees make it difficult for the sensors to see the snow that's underneath the trees, so it makes it difficult for us to measure how much snow there is. After the snow's had a chance to sit on the ground for a while, it gets denser and denser and denser over time, and it changes, which is another reason why snow is very challenging to remotely sense. It doesn't stay the same, it's constantly changing. One of the things that we often do in the field is go dig what we call a snow pit. We literally dig a pit in the snow so we can see all the different layers. The layering is very important.
All this digging is part of ground truthing SnowX, a way of matching up what the airborne instruments see and what is actually sitting on the surface. The ultimate goal of SnowX is to figure out what the best combination of instruments would be for a future satellite mission in order to get a global picture of snow.
We need to know how much snow is in a snowpack, because if we have too much snow and the snow melts too fast, then you can get flooding. And if you don't have enough snow, or if the snow melts too early, that can lead to a longer wildfire season, a more intense drought, and we need to know these things for water resource planning.
After we had a record that was about 15, 20 years long, we started noticing that the extent of the ice in the Arctic was getting smaller over time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. Gradually filling in slowly up here in the north, and looks like it'll continue to do so over the next several days, the next 5-day period. But down here along the coast, here south of the Bering Strait, some fronts coming in, so probably start chipping away at that, with that one coming in late on Tuesday, the first one, and of course that'll kind of cause it to melt away. And for the coastal water forecast, south coast tomorrow, west winds 20 to 25 knots, seas 17 to 19 feet, and southwest 25 knots on the north coast, swinging around to the east at 25, farther to the north. And for, Lynn Canal, south 25, gale force gust of 40 knots, south 25 for Stevens Passage, and light winds for Clarence Strait out of the south at 10 knots with 6-foot seas. And southeast 10 the next day, on Wednesday as well for Clarence Strait, with seas running about 2 feet. Northeast at 10 for Stevens Passage. And Lynn Canal, winds should be out of the north at about 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Here along the coast, west winds 20 to 25 knots. Lowest here on the south coast, with seas running 13 to 16 feet. And then actually up here, winds drop off out of the east down to 10 knots. And for Cook Inlet, northern Cook Inlet, north 15 tomorrow, northwest 20 south of the Forelands, and gale force northwesterlies for the Kamishak Bay area into the Barren Islands, falling back to about 30 knots, same direction here for the western North Gulf Coast. Same forecast for Prince William Sound, northwest 30 knots, seas 6 feet, and northwest 25 for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Much lighter winds in store for Wednesday, down to 15 knots out of the north for Prince William Sound. Those seas back down to 2 feet, northwest 15 there for the Middleton Island zone, and north 15 western North Gulf Coast. 20-knot winds out of the northwest for the Barren Islands, north for Kamishak Bay, and Cook Inlet. Northeast winds on the light side, 10 knots, seas 2 to 3 feet. And Bristol Bay, northwest 15 tomorrow, northwest 25 for the Alaska Peninsula, Sitkinak to Castle Cape here, west at 20, but 30 knots there for Kodiak, and west 25 for Shelikof Strait. Outlook for the Wednesday time frame, north 15 for Shelikof Strait, west down to 20 now for the east side of Kodiak. Small craft advisories though here from Sitkinak all the way to Cape Sarachef, west-northwest 25 to 30 knots, seas 9 to 10 feet. Southeast 25 knots on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, and Bristol Bay northeast at 20, seas 5 feet. And we've got storm warnings coming into the picture here in advance of that frontal system, and the next storm for the far western Aleutians up to 50 knots, and then 40 knots there for Kiska and Amchitka. Northwest 30 knots, Adak and Atka, and Unmak Island Nikolsky, northwest 35 to 40 knots. A little bit lighter, but still northwest 30 to 35 knots there for Unalaska Island. Outlook for Wednesday on Alaska Island, southwest 30 knots sustained, 11 to 12 foot seas. Gale warnings for Unmak Island, southwest 35 knots. 35 to 40 knot southwest winds for Adak and Atka, south 40 knots there for Amchitka and Kiska and Shimei and Attu, southwest 30, seas 20 feet. Southwest coast, north to northeast winds 15 knots, north 15 for St. Matthew Island. Small craft advisories for the Pribilofs with those northwest winds at 25 knots, seas 14 feet, northeast 20 for St. Lawrence Island. And look for that to increase on Wednesday, east 30 knots, St. Lawrence Island, and we've got gales here along the Yukon Delta coast out of the east, 35 knots, 7-foot seas, and small craft advisories for the Pribilofs and the area south of Nunivak Island there for 30-knot winds from the east-southeast and 40-knot easterlies for St. Matthew Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, winds light out of the north, just 10 knots, 15 knots from the northeast on the central coast, 20 knots increasing. And then from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, northeast 25, Cape Thompson to Wales, north 25. And then for Wednesday, northeast 25 to 30 knots here from Wales up to Cape Beaufort, and then 15 knots to become northerly here on the central coast. Increase in the winds there with that trailing edge of that trough catching the eastern Arctic coast. And for tonight's snow advisory this evening and overnight tonight for the eastern interior, Tanana Valley. Winter storm warning till 9 for the Hyder area. And next system coming across the Bering Sea here, and it makes landfall on the coast. The precipitation does late in the afternoon.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.